Hey guys, welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to be talking about Deno.js, and I'm going to be talking about why it exists and is it going to replace Node. So first of all, if you go to Deno.land and you go on the documentation, the term or the sentence that you would see over there is this: Deno is a JavaScript TypeScript runtime with secure defaults and a great developer experience. It's built on V8, Rust and Tokyo. Now there are a few things to take away from this. Number one is it is a JavaScript TypeScript runtime. Now JavaScript runtime, if you've heard that term before, you've probably heard about Node.js. But in this case, it also supports TypeScript by default. So you can actually just set up a project and you'll be able to run TypeScript without any special setup. The second thing to take away is secure defaults. And so Node.js basically allowed you to do anything you want on your system. If you created an application with Node, you could basically access anything on the system. For example, you could access files, you could access the network, and you could make requests as and when you want. Deno does the opposite. It actually restricts you by default, and it tells you that if your application needs anything, that you have to explicitly mention that your application needs to access that resource. So for example, if it needs to access www.example.com/API, then you have to explicitly tell Deno that it needs to access that. The third thing is it's built on V8, Rust and Tokyo. Now Node.js was also built on V8, but in this case they're using Rust and they're using Tokyo. Tokyo is basically a runtime which is built using Rust. So now, being a JavaScript runtime isn't the only thing that's common between Node and Deno. In fact, it was made by the same person who made Node.js as well. But Node.js was actually released as a 1.0 release candidate in 2011, and Deno came in 2020. Now, it sounds very counterintuitive if you think about it. Why would anyone actually build another application from scratch? Why would they build such a platform completely from scratch when Node.js has already evolved so much? It's been a decade almost since Node.js came out. So there were certain reasons why Ryan Dahl decided to move away from Node.js, and he mentions this in a talk where he mentions his regrets with Node.js. The regrets he had were as follows. Number one, not sticking with promises. So back in June 2009, Ryan introduced promises in Node.js, but in February 2010 he actually removed them, which he mentioned that if he were to continue using promises, it would have been much quicker for people to switch to promises and async await. And of course, promises are the necessary abstraction for async await. Without promises, you can't actually use it. Secondly, there was a security issue, which I mentioned before. Node.js actually allowed you to access whatever you want by default, and that's not great for security. For example, your linter shouldn't be able to access your computer and your network. It doesn't need to do that. Third issue was with the build system or GYP. Now V8 had started using GYP, which is why Node also introduced it, but later Chrome actually dropped GYP for GN, and that left Node with being the sole GYP user. Next was package.json and npm. So now if you used Node.js, then you know very well that you can install packages using npm, and all of those packages are actually stored inside of package.json. Now there are two files, package.json and packagelock.json. So the first issue is that you have to maintain package.json and packagelock. And secondly, it's a centralized repository. It's privately controlled, so it's not really, you can't really go anywhere and get your modules from anywhere. Instead, you have to go to this specific place that is maintained by some specific organization or person, and so you have to get from there. Second issue or another issue was node modules, which ended up complicating the module resolution algorithm. And it deviated from the browser semantics. Of course, in the browser, you're actually just importing something directly, or you're doing something like script src is equal to xyz. And so node modules, of course, was a complete deviation from this sort of approach. Next was require module without the extension of JS. So every time you require a module, you actually don't need to put JS in Node.js. It by default just resolves to JS. And again, that is not something how the browser works. In the browser, you have to mention explicitly what the extension of the file is. And then there was index.js, which complicated the module loading system. So what does Dino actually offer? Why is it different from Node.js, or how is it different from Node.js? Number one is it's secure by default. So no network, no file or environment access is given until you explicitly mention that. If you explicitly say that this particular application requires these things, then it will get access. Otherwise, it won't be able to access those things. Secondly, Dino does not use NPM. So what do? You instead import with URLs, just like you would in JavaScript. When you import from URL, you have to explicitly mention the extension as well. So if it's a .ts file, you have to mention that it's a .ts file. Dino does not use package.json in its module resolution algorithm. So again, if you're just importing from URLs, you actually don't need a package.json, which is why it doesn't have one. All async actions in Dino return a promise. So of course, when you're doing an async action, it automatically will return a promise to you. It uses ES modules and does not support require. Now, Node actually had its own module system, which is why we called any module that we created, or any Node file we created, was called a Node module. In case of Dino, we actually have support for ES modules, which is ECMAScript modules. So this is a lot more in line with the semantics. It's a lot more in line with how JavaScript works. Supports TypeScript out of the box. Provides built-in tooling like unit testing, code formatting, and linting to improve developer experience. So there are a lot of tools provided within Dino, and these are tools that you would generally separately install, like Webpack, Rollup, Gulp, or you would be having testing frameworks like Jest, or you would be having code formatting and linting tooling as well. But in case of Dino, you actually don't need to separately install anything. Plus, the advantage is, if you are using Dino, if you already have experience with Dino, you probably have experience with these tools as well. So if you move from one company to another and another company is also using Dino, then you don't actually need to learn something new in terms of the tooling, because the toolings are going to be the same. So this is also an advantage that it provides. Remote code is fetched and cached on first execution and never updated until the code is run with the reload flag. Now, I mentioned that you import stuff with URLs. And so you might be thinking, well, what if I have separate modules and separate servers? And so will I have to download that every single time? Well, no, because it will automatically cache it. And if you want to update a module, let's say if you have Moment.js, and I'm just going to give you a random version, let's say it's 3.5.10, and you want to update it to 3.6, you would have to manually mention you want to reload either that specific module, or you just say -- reload, and it will automatically update all of your dependencies. So you can do that as well. Now, the obvious question comes, that is, will Dino actually replace Node.js, and should you actually invest your time in learning Dino? So first of all, I mean, this is something that's a very long-term question, but what about the next few years? So since Dino is extremely new, it will take some time to mature, and there are a lot of modules that are being built in Dino. So that's the first issue. It will take some time for people to actually pick it up, and for people to consider it to be production ready for their applications. If you're building a large application, you generally don't want to pick up a new technology. So it's definitely not happening in the next maybe 1 or 2 years, but eventually, maybe over the course of 3, 4, 5 years, it might actually become extremely popular because of its security and certain other features. But only time will tell whether people prefer it or don't. So let me know what your thoughts are. Will you actually learn Dino.js? Are you interested in learning it? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, if this was helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos. I'll see you in the next one.